going on, everybody? Gundam the 13th here with another video for the week of the 5th of March 2026. It really does feel like that last month just kind of jumped right over into here. But we are finally in Iron-Blooded Orphan territory here with the Gundam Barbatos Lupus coming out as a 700 raid. Ground and space compatibility, melee priority of 3 and rarity of 4. Very basic kind of bungus stuff going on here. A lot of this really gets its extra depth from the systems, as well as having 2 sub-weapons right out of the gate. So I think actually the way we're going to do this is that we're going to show off one set, the basic set first, and then we'll go back out and into practice again to show off the other set. Although I will tell you, the example match that we do have is a little bit different with how these are mixed up, and you should definitely experiment between using these interchangeably a little bit. Still, for the basic stuff, we have the arm cannon, which also has an alt fire that makes it commit stance to fire, as well as a overfeed, or like a an extra mode on it, kind of like some other weapons do, that actually lets you fire it on the move. But basic stats first. Oh my god. We have 300 range for this version, 350 for this. 1000 per hit here with an ammo of 8, ammo of 20 for the sub-weapon. The sword mace then is 3500 and actually is an instant knockdown weapon. And this suit does have the Elia Vijnana, which is very much like the limited release on some of the crossbone stuff. So this one in particular gets a special attack in that mode, as well as being able to be used in other situations while being up in the air, stuff like that. The melee then is the more consistent thing about this, which is actually a 3 swing. It's got an interesting neutral that just kind of claws downward, as well as a pretty good traveling like downswing for this as well. And then for the missiles, we have an instant stun that also goes into 2800 damage for that. Only 3 shots with this. But the trade-off for the arm rocket cannon in general is the fact that the range is a lot lower. So 250 for this. And then a commit stance version that actually gets an overfeed that just kind of lets you move around neutrally with it, as opposed to being able to boost with the shots. Because the regular version of the arm rocket cannon is actually a heavy stagger that makes you commit for that shot. Which is interesting, except that it has a little bit of a deceptively big radius because it is both shots coming out at once. And it's a little easy to nail other people with, unfortunately, that you're not really intending to. In contrast, for the big mace, we have the twin maces here. These actually have multiple swings on them, and they also have a heavy attack built in that you can do, as well as a very far traveling downswing. I actually kind of like these a little bit more in some situations. The instant knockdown on the sword is nice, but because the claws are kind of just whatever when it comes to baseline damage, 2400, not a whole lot of flexibility with how much you can get out of them. They don't really feel like a good follow-up to it. But moving away from that for a second, let's talk about the stats and the skills, and then we'll get into it for the enhancements before we move on to practice. So almost 30k health here at 27,000. Ballistic beam and medium resistance are 24, 24, and 30. Range strength is 20. Melee strength is a baseline of 50, so not too bad of a start. Movement speed is 145. Top speed is 235. Thruster gauge of 75, and a turning speed of 87. For fire slots, we have 20, 20, and 12 for close, medium, and long. Assault booster level 4, we got high spec ambag 2, maneuver armor 5, melee composite system 3, aerial melee system 2, high performance thruster control system 2, heavy attack 2, power accelerator 2, emergency evasion system 3, anti-blast stabilizer 1, auxiliary power, so you do get a little bit of leeway once that kicks in. For 1000 or more HP, if an attack would destroy you, survive for a set amount of HP instead. Temporarily reduces damage, yada yada. I'll be honest with you, with the kind of focus that this thing gets from people, you can definitely tell that it's working, but you can also tell that it's not working for very long, especially because it's only Aux Power 1. Pursuit Melee Auxiliary Program actually goes up to 2 for this one, so 20% extra damage when you get something on the ground and keep wailing on it. High Performance Counter Program, Nano Laminate Armor. So, we were looking at this in the trailer earlier in the week. When your unit's HP is at 50% or higher, the damage taken from ranged attacks is 2,000 or less. Damage in stagger buildup is also reduced. And again, has to be stressed that even with the nano laminate armor, you get a little bit of leeway, but not that much. So don't think it's going to be doing crazy work for you, and that people aren't going to be nailing you pretty tough. The interesting thing about nano laminate is the way that they did it here is only specifically ranged attacks, as opposed to it being for beam attacks or whatever else like that. So the resistance isn't super crazy for how much it shaves off compared to things that are just like beam coating for beams and stuff like that. We also have Ahab waves, so lower radar visibility for enemy units within 100 meter radius. Extends time to lock on to Psyche weapons to an enemy unit by 150%. Also cancels out ASL function, high performance radar, personnel radar, fake beacon, observational data link, skill effects for all enemies within effect range. So a good amount of stuff with these. These effects do not apply to enemy units with anti-jamming. And then we had the release limiter itself. Dealing damage to an enemy mobile suit with a melee weapon, the skill gauge increases. So you just gotta keep wailing on people for that. Pressing the touchpad fully recovers HP for all parts and temporarily activates the skill. When in effect, the skill increases unit attack power, mobility, high-speed movement, max limit. Reduces the amount of thruster consumed, which you really do just sip fucking boost with this when you're in that mode. Reduces leg overload post, which is important because you also get tactical boost level 1. Now that being said, tactical boost on this doesn't really super feel the same as it does in some other suits, because it also does have all that aerial control and stuff, so you have to really like pace your jumps and stuff before you end up just double jumping anyway. Performance and weapons compatible with the skill are altered, nullifying reaction to ranged attacks taken when executing a melee attack. This can only be used once. That's kind of the unfortunate part, but you know, it figures. So for now, let us get in here with the regular set, and then we'll get into the alt set after that. Alright. So, very basic kind of setup going on with this suit. But as you can see there, 2-piece for the basic shot. And then the commit shot, 3, 4, like 4 shots. And it makes you stand still. If you... Let me reload this real quick. Claw neutral is like a 2-hit, and then a really wide, you know, up and over neutral for the sword. Sword also getting a pretty big swipe for the downswing, and a little bit more reach. That actually kind of cuts itself short because he doesn't swing it out, he swings it down and to the side. That being said, the neutral and the downswing can actually hit deceptively wide because of the way that it's kind of just slashing and bringing it down like that. So there are some suits in some cases where you'll be able to hit them pretty much just off to the side of yourself, and they probably won't see it coming. Like, that's not too bad in that regard. And obviously the follow-up on things that don't have, you know, any kind of coverage. Nice. Don't let the damage in these practice things fool you, because a lot of them are going to have a lot of high melee resistance and other parts at work, especially against type disadvantage suits. Is going to kind of have a hard time unless you're really digging in with some of that stuff. Let's show off the... So you can fire it on the move, you can also boost with it. And the redirection also actually has it come out a little bit quicker. But it is still ammo based. It's not fine. It's not infinite for a certain set amount of time. It's just until you blow through all your shit. Then for the release limiter, the sword actually gets a special downswing, as you see here. It can do it in the air. Okay, I wonder, hold on a second. So the claw can also go up for some area melee. There we go. It's a little bit more as advertised, but you do have to get a landing out of it first to be able to do that. And it still feels like it comes out a little bit slow, but I think it's just because it's waiting for the hang time animation to actually kick in. Also, just as a quick note, it should be obvious, alright? The commit stance actually does a decent amount. I would almost argue that the rifles do a little bit more to the base than the missiles do. That's not bad for like baseline damage. Like you can see it visibly just chunking through it. Also, I really love the sound design for this. Well, I mean, that's not something IBO had going for it for a while. And something to keep in mind is that much like max output and all the other stuff, if you're caught on the ground when it goes off and it's over, you will get temporarily stunned, so try to be in the air or doing something else, at least boosting or whatever. No neutral movement allowed. But I will say, I prefer the guns. I didn't think that I would because so much stuff is also going to have damage control, but as you can see, they're pretty intense in terms of just how much solid buildup they give you. And although you don't really have any protection while committing like that outside of the laminate armor or whatever, we have a couple of these guys running around or just anything doing any kind of accumulation, you're going to be able to contribute and help pretty easily. Alright, so let's go back real quick. We're going to skip a little bit ahead for the video itself because I just kind of picked those other two weapon sets and then we'll get into it. Alright, now, alt weapons, because of course you have to get them out of the step up. I actually got the maces for this earlier in the step up, but you do pretty much have to go through the whole thing to get all this junk. So just something to keep in mind. The regular shot then, instant stagger. You can see that it kind of almost affected, but I think it was mostly because of the shield. But yeah, not a lot of radius on these. In fact, I kind of wonder. No. There's a very big... What would you say? There's a very big opening or kind of like gate between these. Oh, I guess that's more so for legs. But you'll have a lot of situations because it's holding its arms out so wide for this, and it is a two-shot weapon, that the heavy stagger will sometimes wrap around the left or right, depending on where you're trying to fire from people on cover. And in other situations like that, if you're not too careful, this could be a friendly, right? Also, check out that downswing. And you might cause more trouble than you meant to, so be careful. In this mode, with these, you can also just kind of do some stun looping, especially because you have two shots coming out of the neutral for the claws, which means that you can stagger out when that other hit will connect. And you also have two different melee, which, by the way, keep in mind that downswing with the mace is actually a two-piece hit. Bang, bang. Yep. So the initial one on the left comes out in a swing, and then you shoot forward. I'm very surprised that the neutral isn't actually him just doing it like an overhand like 2 times, kind of like the red gunum and stuff with the sabers. But let's check out the heavy attack here because so kind of the signature, just banging on the drums with this thing. For anyone who is an Extreme Versus fan, you probably see that as one of the command grabs that this thing has in that game. So for the release limiter, this is a little bit interesting because now you only have aerial melee for the claw, I think. Yeah. Because this has that heavy attack and because of the nature of the downswing, they didn't really let it do aerial melee with these. Which similarly means that outside of just the basic outside of the basic stat boosts it doesn't really get like, you know, an extra swing. It doesn't heavy stagger or, you know, do like stun point 5 or anything like that. You're just really fucking people up in a more basic way. It kind of just, you know, supplements like, look at that. That's 20k if you land all that. Now, in a lot of cases, it is going to be a little bit rough. It doesn't have a big windup, but they are very short range. So this is something that you should probably be, if you're like used to the Zeku 1 and the way that you kind of have to sit on people's knees to get that heavy swing off. This, I would say, is very similar to that. You know, because it's not very slow, but it is very situational on how consistently it's going to go off on people. Now, unlike our guns, though, I'm gonna show it off here real quick. Because of the rate of fire being considerably lower, you are still doing visibly decent damage to the base, but not as quickly. That being said, we do have the overfeed mode for this. And this, as I said before, it's just a stagger. It's not a heavy stagger anymore. But you got a good radius on it if they're bunched up. And you do fire them in sequence as opposed to just together like you do for the other gun. But as you can see there, even with no boost on it, the range is actually doing a decent amount to this. Also, don't do that. I will say the claws reaching downwards for the neutral is nice. Like you saw there, it didn't make contact with that second swing, and there's going to be certain situations, you know, say if you're here on the edge of this or whatever, where it's going to have a hard time really reaching. Also, sometimes, like, even just that much of a difference means that it's either, you know, waving in the air or just digging into the fucking ground. So, things to keep in mind, especially when you're on maps like this. One thing that I haven't gotten to do yet, mostly because I think the devs are cowards, is that they haven't had 700 really be a dedicated, like, random map or anything. They've done 750. They've skipped around, you know, 650 and 700 a lot since they introduced that map last week, going like extremely low cost with it. So I'm hoping that we can have some action with this in there. So, moving on, we do have an example match. The example match actually had me using, like I said before, the guns as well as the maces. I kind of found that in that match, because it was the first time that we really used the regular guns, that they were actually pretty nice and had a lot of build up, good stun and stuff like that, despite not being an instant stun weapon. And the maces, because of the way that they stun loop and stuff, were nice, even if it wasn't particularly easy to get those heavy attacks off. So, for the most part, I think that is going to be my preferred go, but I'll try to keep alternating them and stuff when we go throughout the week. But let us check out that example match right around here. They're just gonna see like most of us buzzing around that corner like, oh, what?
Take care out there.
If they're mostly like Destinies and shit like that, then we're gonna have a hard time, because they're not gonna really have a lot of stuff to ping them out of the sky with.
Here we go. Commence operation.
What are you doing, dude?
The enemies captured a beacon!
That's exactly why I elected to switch out again. Oh, No, the flash. Oh, you can hit him though. He just kind of slanted and knows it though.
Your ally's been knocked out! This damage shouldn't affect you much. Enemy mobile suit.
Oh god.
Whoa! You've entered an enemy jamming field! You've taken some serious damage! Whoa! The enemy's... An ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit! We captured a beacon!
The power!
Special effect activated!
Yeah, no, the guns on this, at least for what we're dealing with this round, definitely feel pretty good. Second that we have to deal with like a bunch of other stuff buzzing around, that's probably not gonna be so great. Oh. Whoa.
Enemies captured a beacon! Allied signal detected!
Fancy air gun. Abadoo. No, that buzz.
An ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit.
Pilot. No.
Your special effect time is up! We captured a beacon! Your ally's been knocked out! Suit. Your ally's been knocked out! Pick where and how you'll sortie. An ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit. Good luck!
He's not dead.
An ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit. Your ally's been knocked out. Enemy mobile suit destroyed. Your ally's been knocked out. An ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit. Looks like we're ahead for now. Whoa! You've entered an enemy jamming field. Your ally's been knocked out. Special effect. An ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit.
Oh.
You've taken some serious damage.
Oh, good.
Enemy mobile suit destroyed. 2 minutes left in the mission.
Yep.
An ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit. Your special effect time is up. 1 minute remaining. Stay sharp. Oh no!
No! Too stumpy for that. Actually, kind of like the regular guns for this.
Ally's been knocked out.
Accumulation's actually staying pretty consistent here. Now, part of that's also because there's a couple of us that are doing that. Things are gonna fall apart at the last second here. These guys are all just gonna try to hold out.
Good luck. Your ally's been knocked out. Time has run out. Yeah, we won!
Okay, so I think that's gonna be what we do. Mostly bongo and gun. But yeah, it's still hard to really get those heavies in there. Our other guy was really tearing it up. That being said, the sword isn't bad. And there's definitely some utility with the tactical jump and all that shit like they were showing in the trailer.
Here are this battle's
But
rewards.
I think gun and drumsticks is gonna be the way we go for the bulk of the week.
And that was our run in Lupus. I'll be honest with you, when I first got this, first of all, I wasn't really expecting a whole lot. You know, there's a lot of stuff at this cost for 700 that can really kind of just kite this suit and give it a hard time. But I think when you lean on the guns a little bit, not only do they have a decent amount of buildup, but they can also put a lot of pressure on suits that are trying to get that kind of shit off. Now, obviously, there are other suits that are just going to flap right through that and or have other resistances that'll probably make it easier for them to close the distance and hit you before you can hit them, just because I will say, between the melee and as you can see there, even for switching to guns, you know, there's no special systems, there's no kind of like mitigation of that startup time. The fastest thing that you're gonna get is your main weapon for the maces. The sword, not necessarily so. So there are some situations where I would argue that the way that this suit works and the startup times and switch times for weapons makes it a little too slow. And I don't think that that's something that Alaya Vijnana necessarily changes. I might try to take a look at that later just to see for sure. But these are my initial impressions. You know, like I normally say, once I do have the suit, and I do have this on my regular account, I'll be playing this on Jenny throughout the week and kind of just checking it out and trying to suffer through dailies just to see if I can really get more of a hang of it. But on the surface, not bad. I feel like most people who wanted this suit have already gotten it because it's Iron-Blooded Orphans, right? I think that the guns do have good accumulation if you really get used to just, you know, your gotcha moments when it comes to getting the missile shots off for heavy stagger and then going in to do other stuff. You can probably see some success. I will say though, there is a lot of stuff at this cost that's very high output, just range barf that can really hold you down pretty easily. You're gonna have a lot of frustrating moments in this too, because that nano laminate and all that really doesn't do a whole lot against just overwhelming firepower. And I wonder if the devs just kind of overestimated that or underestimated how bad that was gonna be, or if they just were like, well, we gotta have it be somewhere in 700s, and that's kind of why they just jumped ahead to the Lupus. Whether or not we'll get Lupus Rest or some other stuff outside of the Earth Hunt suit that we're gonna get next week, who the hell knows? Probably just the two, and then they'll move on. But for anyone else looking for a raid, there's a couple that are definitely solid. We had a lot of raid heavy matches during yesterday's stuff. So definitely not a necessity. I can definitely see some people putting in a lot of good work with this over time. But you know, if IBO wasn't your bag to begin with, I wouldn't say you have to stress over getting this suit in order to try to keep up in terms of raid stuff, especially at 700 of all things. You can get by with most generals. There are some raids that can do the work that are already there. But it'll be neat to see these running around. And obviously we still have another Iron-Blooded Orphan suit in the wings when we get into next week as well. I'm assuming. Unless they really do just try to stagger it out, but I'd be surprised. But that is the long and short of it for the initial impressions for the Barbatos Lupus. Until next time, when we actually... Well, I don't know if we're going to have enough for the next one. But maybe the one after that, we'll see what happens and who gets what. But until then, hope you guys have a good rest of your morning, night, or whatever. And I'll talk to you all in the next video.